What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to another episode of Coding with Kevin. One video that I haven't done yet is a video on how to actually learn React. Today, that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna learn the foundation of React in less than 30 minutes. I hope you're as excited as I am. I've put out a lot of coding challenges for React, but today we're gonna learn the very beginnings of it for anybody who hasn't yet dug into it. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below. Give this video a like if I earned it. I really appreciate you all. Let's go ahead and jump into things. All right, gang. So one thing we want to start out with when beginning our React projects is you want to make sure you have Node installed. Node comes with a repo called Node Package Manager, and using that will allow us to use commands like npm and install libraries that we want to take advantage of. Once you have Node installed, you can see which version you have by typing in node-v. I have version 14. From there, in order to begin our React project, we're going to type npx. It's different than the command npm. npx will allow us to run a command without actually needing to install the code library. So rather than installing React's repo and all those commands and then run create React app, we can essentially access that repo on GitHub remotely by doing npx create React app and then the name of the app. We're going to call ours Learn React in 30 minutes. From there, hit enter. It's going to go ahead and install everything. It takes a little bit, so I'll see you after it gets installed. Once it finishes installing, you're going to see these commands. npm start is going to be the most common command we use. It's going to start our development server, and then it's going to choose your default browser to run the project live in. It's super helpful. It allows us to debug things in real time. It allows us to see changes in real time. Very helpful. From there, we will go ahead and start by cding into our project, which is change directory, and we'll run start. I have VS Code, so when I type in learn React in, I can hit tab, boom. And then because I have VS Code installed, I can type the shortcut code space period and then enter. And this will go ahead and open this up in a new instance of VS Code. On the left-hand side here, we can see there's a couple folders. There's node modules, that's where all of our installed packages go. There's a public folder where we have our favicon icons, a couple logos, and the HTML. We can see here, there's this odd div where it says it's an ID of root. This is where our entire React project is going to get rendered. And we can see that by looking at the index.js in our source folder. We do a react dom.render. We create a wrapper just basically saying, hey, this needs to be in strict mode. It's a certain set of rules that needs to be followed in order for things not to throw an error. Our project gets wrapped with those. And then we target that element with the ID of root. That is where our entire project will get loaded. They ship with a couple really cool things such as web vitals, some setup test for Jest. We're gonna go ahead and get rid of those files because we don't need them for our project, but we'll do that here and get started. We're gonna go ahead and get rid of setup test, web vitals. Oh, actually, before we do that, let me go ahead and do npm run start so you can see how the project looks. So we run that command in our terminal. It's going to go ahead and open in a browser here. This is what the page will look like. So if we go ahead and throw that to the side, throw this to the side, and in our app.js, we can do learn React write meow. And we hit save. We can see this changed in real time to write meow. Kitty. See, so that's a really cool, powerful thing about React is every time you hit save, you can see something render on the screen. And we can also see if we cause an error, let's just delete all that. You can see in real time, it's going to help us debug things as well. So very powerful tools. We're going to go ahead and return null. So that way we get a blank screen. Go ahead and delete that logo. Let's delete this test file, the logo SVG, report with vitals, setup test. We need to save app.js, and we need to edit the report web vitals out of the index.js. Lines, oh, we need to get rid of that as well. Boom. So now we're at a blank canvas where we can start. And today we're going to go ahead and build a to-do list, a very simple, easy project, but it's something that'll help me give you a really good base for just the foundation of React. Whenever I create a project, I like to create a folder structure. We're going to go ahead and create a component called to-do, but we are going to put it in a folder called to-do. I like this structure. Whenever you have a component, create a separate folder and store whatever's related to that component in that folder. It helps keep the project very organized. So we're going to go ahead and create todo.js. We're also going to create todo.css. So we're going to go ahead and create a const todo equals arrow function. We're also now going to export default todo. So this essentially creates our component in the form of a functional component. I'd recommend you Google what is the difference between a stateful and a functional component. Typically one is class-based and one is function-based. React is moving a lot more towards functional components, so I would definitely make sure you brush up on what that means. We are going to go ahead and return a div that says hello, and in our app.js, we're going to go ahead and type in to do. But the nice part about VS Code is it has built-in recognition. So it's like, oh, is this what you want? I'm going to hit enter, and you're going to see it's going to fill out the import for us and finish the line 5. Maybe it doesn't finish line 5, but at least it does the import for us. So when we hit save, we can now see hello is being rendered, and hello is in to do. But because we exported the component and imported it into app.js, it's able to recognize, oh, cool, we need to make that part of the application. It's a really nice, beautiful part about using frameworks when you're coming from just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So now that we got that going, in our to-do, we're going to go ahead and we're going to import our CSS file, which is todo.css. Obviously, there's nothing built in there yet. Cannot find to do, oh, it needs to be capital T. There we go. In our return statement, we're going to go ahead and delete this, and we're going to make a section element. Inside that section element, we're going to create a form. Inside that form, we're going to have an input and a button. Oops, not button. Button. There we go. Boom. Inside the button, we're going to say add item, and we're going to hit save. So now we have an input field where we can type in, and we have a button called add item. In our space before the return, we are going to go ahead and create a variable, and it's going to be an array with state and a function called setState. And this is associated with a React hook called useState. Now, if you're not familiar with state, It is a way that we can have default values rendered for how the screen is supposed to load, or any default state that we want the web page to be defaulted to. So if someone's not signed in, we might display something to someone who's not signed in versus who is signed in, right? In order to use this hook, however, we need to go ahead and import use state from React. Now, inside here, we're going to have an array of objects. And our first object is going to have a name variable. We're going to do hello. And then we're going to have an ID variable. And this is another really cool part about frameworks is we're going to use something called backticks. Inside it, we're going to type hello. When you're using backticks, you can actually inject a function or a variable into the string by using $ curly brackets. Now we're going to use something called math.random times 5. And math.random times 5 will essentially just give us a random number between 0 and 5. We're going to go ahead and hit Shift-Alt down. We're going to hit Control-D and change hello to goodbye. We have to add a comma there. And now the last thing is we're going to create a div with a curly bracket of list. Oops, there we go. We're actually going to wrap that in a unordered list component. Bring this bad boy on up. So what we've done, we've created a default state that is an array of objects. We can't yet inject it into the application to display, but we are going to create a variable called list that is going to loop through our state array and associate name and ID with a list item. We're going to do something called dry code, which is don't repeat yourself. So here, we're going to create const list, and we're going to do state.map. If you're not already familiar with map, definitely go ahead and look it up. So we're going to say item, and we're going to return a list item. Inside each list item, we're going to have a paragraph tag with curly bracket item.name. And then we're going to have a button that's just going to be an X. So we have list. We're essentially going to loop through the state. So the first time it's going to loop through, it's going to be this object. It's going to be associated with this item. And so then we can get the name from that object by doing item.name. So we'll see hello printed out and goodbye printed out. We're also going to have a button associated with each one with an X, just as an X to go ahead and essentially remove that item from the array when we build that functionality. So we're going to hit save. And now you can see hello and goodbye. So where do we go from here? Well, we need to add functionality to this button, and we need to add functionality to this form, and also the input field. So we're going to add a couple things. We're going to add type equals text to the input field, and the button, we're going to do type equals submit. We're not going to add an onClick method to this button, however. React Forms comes with a associated onSubmit functionality. So we're going to say onSubmit, and we are going to create a handle submit function. So when you're building a form in React and you have an input field or a button, hitting the enter key inside the input field or the onClick for the button will trigger the function in the onSubmit prop in the form element. So we'll go ahead here and we will say const handle submit arrow function. We're going to pass E into handle submit. And And we're going to do e.prevent default. So we're going to create const, and we're going to have a value here. Oops, sorry. We're going to have const value equals. Now, what you might be used to if you're specifically coming from just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is you might be used to event.target.value in order to find the value of this input field. That's a super valid way of doing things, but I'm going to introduce you to another React hook. It's called useRef. So up here, we're going to create a const called input, and we're going to assign the useRef functionality to it. And I keep misspelling consts, my apologies. And then down here in the input field, we're going to say ref prop is going to be associated now with the input variable. What this does is this creates a reference to the input field, and it stores that reference in this variable. So now rather than doing event.target.value, we can actually do input.current.value. Understanding the useRef hook in React has really helped me in my professional world not have to use event.target.default or document.querySelector. It's a really nice way to stay within the React framework and what they give you. So now actually, if we console log value, we can open up our inspect tool, go over to console, ignore all those warnings. But now if I say hello and I hit enter, we can see it printed out right there in the console. And also if I click this, you see how it went 2 to 3. So that's again another nice part about the React form is it automatically assigns this onSubmit prop when the enter key is hit in the input field or when the button is clicked, but only if you have type of submit. So we're on the home stretch. All we need to do now is we need to add a function to add an item to the array and also a function to remove an item from the array. Inside our handle submit function, since we're already getting access to the value, it's really simple to be able to add something to the array. We want to call our set state function. We want to grab our previous state and have an arrow function where we spread out the previous state and then we add the new object. So we're going to say name is going to be value, since we're taking the input field's value and assigning it to that const variable on line 12. And then we're going to say ID. We're going to do the backticks, $ curly brackets, value dash $ curly brackets, math.random. And look at that, VS Code stored it for us. So this will now print out or essentially take what's currently in the state, which is these two. It'll spread those out, so it'll add those to this new array that we're going to set. But in addition, we're now going to be able to add the new item to the array with a unique ID. And the reason why I have this ID being made is because React asks for us to assign a key value to each item. And the key value will essentially allow us to make sure that each item that's printed out has a unique identifier associated with it. So item.id is what we'll associate to there. We'll hit save, and now we'll refresh our application. We'll say go to store, hit enter, and we can see now go to store is the next list item rendered. Now the last thing we want to do is we can see that after we hit enter, go to store is still there in the input field. We're going to go ahead and essentially say input.current.value will equal an empty string. Save that. Now let's refresh our code. We can see these two defaults still populate. But now we can say go to store, and now when I hit enter, the input field will get cleared, but the go to store item will be added to the array. Pretty sweet. So the last thing we need to do is here on the button is now we need to add an on click that's associated with remove item. We'll go ahead here and we'll create a const called remove item. It's going to be an array, and we're going to also have a value here in our button that is going to be associated with the item.id. So now this is where we are going to use the event object. So we're going to say const new state equals, it's going to be state.filter, which if you haven't worked with the filter method, it's a great shorthand way of looping through an array and returning something that either does match some conditions you give or doesn't match some conditions you give. So in ours, we're going to say item and item.id is not exactly equal to event.target.value. Okay. So what we could actually do to make sure that we're not using the event.target.value, we could say const button ID equals use ref. And then now we're also going to assign a ref equals button ID. And so rather than do this, we can do button ID dot current dot value. And so now we don't have to actually pass in that event variable to there. Now the on click, we also want to just pass an arrow function here. And the reason being is because the on click tends to get fired or triggered on render if this structure is not followed. Definitely go ahead and Google why is this necessary. I'm not going to go through that right now, but trust me, you'll want to do this to make sure it doesn't fire right away. So now we can go ahead and hit save. New state is assigned a value but never used. Oh, that is because we need to now go ahead and set state to our new state. So now we'll hit save, and when I click this X, goodbye disappears and hello should disappear. Hey, let's figure out why that is. So we will log button ID dot current at value. Save that, and now we'll see why that is not being removed. It's saying type error cannot read properties of null. So essentially it's saying we can't read value of null. So in these cases, maybe using the event.target.value will be the better route to go. So let's do event.target.value. Now we'll need to pass E in to both of those. Now we'll go back here. Let's refresh our application. And now we can see hello gets removed and goodbye doesn't. So there's obviously something going on with the original array. I don't know why that happened. Now it works. I did just get rid of the console log, so there might have just been some cache issue. But yeah, that's it. Now you have a good foundation for React. We learned how to create a React app today. We learned the use state and use ref React hooks for functional components. We learned about the form element and how we can have the onSubmit function take care of the enter press and the button click. We also learned that we can loop through things once or create code once and have multiple things get printed out. Bada boom! Guys, wow, as you can see, React is a very powerful framework. I used to be very hardcore Angular until I jumped into React, and my JavaScript skills really started going through the roof. And so did my paycheck, so. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below, give me a thumbs up. If you found this easy, check out some of my React coding challenges here. I've got senior, mid-level, and beginner coding challenges. If you do well on them, that might mean you're ready to start job searching for being a React developer. I really appreciate you all sticking around, and until next time, take care.